The scorching Arizona sun beat down on Daisy Sullivan's back as she scrubbed at her cousin's linens, the harsh lye soap burning the cracks in her hands. It was 1876, and at 26 years old, Daisy had already endured more whispers and sidelong glances than most women faced in a lifetime. "Still washin' our clothes like it's all you're good for." Violet, her eldest cousin, leaned against the doorframe of the washhouse, her pregnant belly protruding proudly beneath her apron. "Lord knows you'll never have a family of your own to tend to." Daisy kept her head down, working the fabric against the washboard with more force than necessary. 5 years of marriage to Thomas had yielded no children, and after his death from fever last winter, the Sullivan family ranch had become her only refuge, a refuge that felt more like punishment with each passing day. "You know what they call women who can't bear children," piped up Maybelle, Violet's younger sister, joining her at the doorway. "Barren, just like that stretch of land past Jackson's Creek. Useless." The two women cackled, and Daisy bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted copper. She would not give them the satisfaction of her tears. Not today. "Your husband's been dead near a year," Violet continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Even if you found another fool willing to marry you, what man wants a wife who can't give him sons?" The question hung in the air, requiring no answer. Daisy had asked herself the same thing countless times during sleepless nights. "Uncle George needs you to fetch supplies from town," Maybelle said, finally offering something other than cruelty. "He's making a list. Be ready to take the wagon at dawn." When they left, Daisy allowed herself a single, shuddering breath. Tomorrow's trip to Copper Creek would be a blessed reprieve from her cousin's constant reminders of her failure as a woman. Dawn arrived with merciful swiftness. Daisy secured the last crate in the wagon and checked the list one final time. Flour, sugar, coffee, ammunition, nails, and a dozen other essentials needed for the coming month. The journey to town would take 3 hours if the weather held. "Don't dawdle in town," Uncle George warned, handing her a small pouch of money. "And don't spend a cent more than necessary." "Yes, Uncle George," Daisy replied, tucking the pouch into her pocket. The old man had been kind enough to take her in after Thomas died, but his generosity extended only so far as her usefulness. The journey to Copper Creek passed without incident, the dusty trail winding through sagebrush and cactus under the vast blue sky. For these few hours, Daisy allowed herself to imagine a different life, one where she wasn't defined by what her body couldn't do. Copper Creek had grown considerably since the silver mine opened 2 years prior. The once sleepy town now bustled with activity, miners, merchants, and the occasional cowboy passing through on cattle drives. Daisy guided her wagon to Thornton's general store, where she'd complete most of her errands. "Miss Sullivan," Mr. Thornton greeted her with a nod as she entered. "Been a spell since we've seen you." "Good morning, Mr. Thornton. I have quite a list today." As the shopkeeper gathered her supplies, the bell above the door jangled. Daisy turned to see 3 cowboys enter, trail dust coating their clothes and fatigue evident in their movements. The tallest among them caught her eye, broad-shouldered with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. "Pardon us, madam," he said, removing his hat to reveal dark hair streaked with gold from the sun. "Don't mean to crowd you none." "Not at all," Daisy replied, quickly averting her gaze. "Mr. Thornton called from behind the counter. Owen, didn't expect you boys back so soon. The drive go well?" "Well enough," the tall cowboy Owen answered. "Cattle fetched a fair price in Tucson." Daisy continued checking items off her list, trying to ignore the cowboy's presence, particularly the tall one with the storm-gray eyes who kept glancing her way. She was placing the last of her purchases in a crate when disaster struck. Her elbow caught a display of canned peaches, sending them crashing to the floor. One tin split open, spilling sticky syrup across the planks and splattering her worn boots and the hem of her dress. "Oh no," she gasped, mortification flooding her cheeks with heat. "Don't fret, Miss Sullivan," Mr. Thornton said, though his frown suggested otherwise. "Accidents happen." "I'll pay for the damaged goods," she said quickly, mentally calculating how she would explain the extra expense to Uncle George. "Let me help," came a deep voice, and suddenly Owen was kneeling beside her, gathering the intact cans. "No harm in a little spilled syrup." "Thank you, but I can manage," Daisy murmured, painfully aware of how the sweet syrup was soaking into her skirts. "I'm Owen Anderson," he said, ignoring her protest and continuing to help. "Just got back from driving cattle to Tucson with the Circle J Ranch." "Daisy Sullivan," she replied, because her mother had raised her with manners, even if speaking to strange men made her uncomfortable. "Sullivan." Owen's brow furrowed. "Any relation to George Sullivan out by Copper Canyon?" "He's my uncle. I live at his ranch," Mr. Thornton interrupted. "That'll be $12.43, Miss Sullivan." Daisy's stomach sank as she counted out the money. After paying for the damaged peaches, she would be short for the nails Uncle George needed for fence repairs. She hesitated, trying to decide what item she could do without. "I'll get those nails for you," Owen said suddenly, noting her dilemma. "Consider it payment for the entertainment of watching peaches race across the floor." His smile was warm, lacking any mockery, but pride made Daisy shake her head. "That's very kind, but I couldn't possibly, Miss Sullivan," Mr. Thornton interrupted. "There's a letter for you." Nearly forgot with all the commotion. He handed her an envelope with unfamiliar handwriting. Puzzled, Daisy tucked it into her pocket for later reading. "Thank you, Mr. Thornton." "As for the nails, already paid for," Owen said, dropping a small bag on her pile of goods. "Circle J has an account here and we needed nails anyway. I'll just tell the boss we got extra." Before she could protest further, Owen tipped his hat and rejoined his companions, leaving Daisy flustered and confused by his kindness. With her goods loaded in the wagon, Daisy found a quiet spot behind the store to read the mysterious letter. The contents made her gasp. It was from a lawyer in Denver, informing her that a distant cousin had died and left her a modest inheritance, $300, and a small cabin on the outskirts of Copper Creek, $300. It was more money than she'd ever possessed. Enough to start a new life away from the constant reminders of her barrenness, away from her cousin's cruel words. The cabin might be little more than a shack, but it would be hers alone. Hope, that dangerous emotion she'd buried alongside Thomas, fluttered in her chest. She was so absorbed in rereading the letter that she didn't notice Owen approaching until his shadow fell across the paper. "Good news, I hope?" he asked. Leaning against the wagon, Daisy quickly folded the letter. "Just some family business." Owen nodded, respecting her privacy. "I wanted to apologize if I embarrassed you in there. Wasn't my intention." "You were kind," Daisy admitted, "but I'm not accustomed to accepting charity. Not charity, just one neighbor helping another." He studied her face with those storm-gray eyes. "You heading back to your uncle's place now?" "Soon. I have a stop to make first." She hesitated, then asked, "Do you know where Simmons Lane is? I'm told it's on the edge of town." "I do indeed. It's on my way, actually. I'd be happy to show you." Against her better judgment, Daisy found herself accepting his offer. There was something about Owen Anderson that put her at ease, a straightforward manner that seemed free of hidden motives. As they rode together, Owen pointed out changes in the growing town. He'd been working for the Circle J Ranch for 3 years, he explained, after coming west from Missouri. He spoke easily, requiring little response from Daisy, which suited her fine. "That's Simmons Lane up ahead," he said eventually, indicating a narrow dirt road leading toward a stand of cottonwoods. "Not much out here except a few old cabins. Mind if I ask what business brings you this way?" Daisy hesitated, then decided there was no harm in honesty. "According to this letter, I've inherited a cabin from a cousin I barely knew." Owen's eyebrows rose. "Well now, that's something. Which one is yours?" "Number 8, apparently." His face registered surprise. "I know that place. It's small but solid. Old man Perkins kept it in good repair before he passed." They found the cabin nestled among the cottonwoods, a simple one-room structure with a small porch. Daisy's heart quickened as she climbed down from the wagon to inspect her inheritance. The cabin was indeed small but appeared sturdy, with a stone chimney and a water pump in the yard. "It needs work," Owen commented, running his hand along the weathered wood, "but nothing that can't be fixed. The roof looks sound." It's more than I expected, Daisy said softly, peering through a grimy window. Inside, she could make out a bed frame, a table, and a cast iron stove. You planning to live here? Owen asked, his tone carefully neutral. Daisy turned to face him. I'm considering it. Alone. I've been alone since my husband died last winter, Mr. Anderson. Only difference would be the roof over my head, understanding dawned in his eyes. I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Sullivan. Thank you, she said, unused to genuine sympathy. I should be getting back. Uncle George will be expecting me before sundown. Owen nodded, helping her back onto the wagon. I've kept you too long. Just remember, if you do decide to move in here, this place is a ways out. Might be wise to have a neighbor check in from time to time. Are you volunteering, Mr. Anderson? The words slipped out before Daisy could stop them, surprising herself with their boldness. His smile was slow and warm. I believe I am, Mrs. Sullivan. The ride back to the Sullivan ranch was long, but Daisy barely noticed the hours passing. Her mind was filled with possibilities, a life of her own making in that small cabin, away from the daily reminder of her failure to bear children. She would need to find work in town, but she could sew well enough, and perhaps Mrs. Thornton would need help in the store. By the time she arrived, Daisy had nearly convinced herself it could work. You're late, Uncle George said gruffly as she began unloading supplies. I'm sorry, Uncle. There was a letter waiting for me in town that required attention. His bushy eyebrows rose. A letter from who? Daisy explained about the inheritance, watching her uncle's expression shift from skepticism to calculation. $300, you say? He scratched his beard. Well, that's a tidy sum. You'll be wanting to invest it wisely. I could use that money to expand the south pasture. It would benefit us all. Daisy recognized the familiar pattern, her uncle's way of claiming whatever came into her possession. Actually, Uncle, I was thinking of using it to establish myself in the cabin my cousin left me. His face darkened. Nonsense! What would a woman alone do in a cabin outside town? It's not proper. I'm a widow, not an unmarried girl, and I've been burden enough on your charity. Burden, he snorted. You earn your keep well enough with your work, but you're being foolish, Daisy. What would people say about a woman living alone? They already say plenty about me, she replied quietly. At least in my own place, I wouldn't have to hear it. Maybelle appeared on the porch, curiosity plain on her face. Hear what? Uncle George waved a dismissive hand. Your cousin's got notions about moving to some shack in town, thinks $300 makes her independent. Maybelle's eyes widened. $300? Where did you get that kind of money? An inheritance, Daisy said shortly, continuing to unload supplies. Well, isn't that convenient? Violet said, joining her sister on the porch. Finally realized no man will have you, so you're running off to be a spinster? Daisy tightened her grip on a flour sack. I haven't decided anything yet. What's to decide? Violet pressed. Even with money, you'll still be that barren widow Sullivan. Living alone won't change what you are. The words cut as intended, but instead of the usual shame, Daisy felt a flare of anger. And what exactly am I, Violet? A woman who works from sunrise to sunset, a woman who's known grief. Or just someone who's tired of being reminded of what she lacks? Silence fell over the yard. Uncle George cleared his throat uncomfortably. That's enough talk for today. Get those supplies inside, Daisy. We'll discuss your plans later. But as she carried bags and boxes into the house, Daisy knew there was nothing to discuss. She would leave this place where her worth was measured only by what her body couldn't do. The following week passed in a blur of preparations. Daisy visited the lawyer in town to claim her inheritance, set aside money for supplies to make her cabin livable, and gave notice to her increasingly disgruntled uncle. Despite his attempts to dissuade her, alternating between dire warnings and grudging offers of a small wage for her work, her determination never wavered. On her third trip to town, she encountered Owen Anderson outside the mercantile. His face brightened upon seeing her. Mrs. Sullivan. I was hoping to cross paths with you again. Mr. Anderson, she greeted him, oddly pleased by the coincidence. I'm preparing to move to my cabin next week. Is that so? His smile widened. I'm glad to hear it. Have you had a chance to make any repairs yet? I've hired Mr. Jenkins to fix the windows and door, but there's much to do still. I'd be happy to lend a hand, Owen offered. I'm handy with tools and the Circle J gives us Sundays off. Daisy hesitated. Accepting help from a man she barely knew seemed improper, yet there was something about Owen that inspired trust. That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose on your free time. No imposition at all. To be honest, Mrs. Sullivan, I admire your courage. Moving to a new place, starting fresh, that takes grit. His sincere admiration warmed something inside her that had been cold for too long. Then I would appreciate your help, Mr. Anderson. Perhaps this Sunday. I'll be there at noon, he promised. Sunday arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures, perfect weather for cabin repairs. Daisy had already moved some essentials to the cabin, including bedding, cookware, and the few personal items she'd brought from her marriage home. She was sweeping the porch when Owen arrived, leading his horse and carrying a toolbox. "Morning, Mrs. Sullivan," he called. "Hope I'm not too early." "Right on time," she replied, noticing he'd taken care with his appearance. His shirt was clean, his hair neatly combed beneath his hat. They worked comfortably together throughout the day, Owen repairing loose floorboards and a wobbly table while Daisy cleaned and organized. He told stories of his time on cattle drives that made her laugh for the first time in months. She, in turn, shared memories of her childhood in Kansas before her parents died of influenza. As the sun began to set, they sat on the porch with coffee, admiring their day's work. "It's coming along nicely," Owen observed. "Another day or two of work and it'll be proper cozy." "Thanks to your help," Daisy said sincerely. "I don't know how to repay you. No need for payment among friends." He paused, then asked carefully, "If you don't mind me asking, what made you decide to strike out on your own like this?" Daisy stared into her coffee cup, considering how much to share. "My husband's death left me dependent on relatives who see me as less than whole." "Because you have no children?" Owen asked gently, her head snapped up in surprise. "How did you know small towns breed big gossip?" "I've heard the Sullivan cousins aren't known for their kindness." His expression was free of pity, which she appreciated. "For what it's worth, I think there's more to a person's worth than whether they can have children. My cousins disagree. To them, I'm barren land, useless." She hadn't meant to be so blunt, but there was something about Owen that made honesty easy. Anger flashed in his eyes. "Then they're fools who don't deserve your company." His indignation on her behalf was unexpected and touching. They sat in companionable silence until Owen reluctantly announced he needed to return to the ranch. "I could come back next Sunday," he offered. "Help you finish up before you move in proper." "I'd like that," Daisy said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. In the week that followed, Daisy weathered the increasing hostility of her cousins. Violet and Maybelle had taken to calling her the Barren widow to her face, while Uncle George alternated between sullen silence and lectures about her foolishness. The day she packed the last of her belongings into the wagon couldn't come soon enough. "Running away won't change what you are," Violet taunted as Daisy loaded her trunk. "You'll die alone in that cabin with no children to remember your name." For once, Daisy didn't bite her tongue. "I'd rather die alone than live surrounded by cruelty." Maybelle gasped at her boldness, but Daisy was beyond caring. She climbed onto the wagon and took the reins, leaving behind the ranch without a backward glance. The cabin welcomed her with afternoon sunlight streaming through clean windows. Owen had been true to his word, returning the previous Sunday to help with final repairs. They'd installed new hinges on the cupboards, fixed a leak in the roof, and even planted a small vegetable garden behind the cabin. As she unpacked her meager possessions, Daisy felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced since before Thomas fell ill. This small space was hers alone, a place where no one would judge her worth by her empty womb. The next few weeks established a rhythm to her new life. She found work sewing for Mrs. Peterson, the dressmaker in town, 3 days a week. The other days she spent improving her cabin, hanging curtains, building a chicken coop, and tending her garden. On Sundays, Owen invariably appeared with some small gift seeds for her garden, a book he thought she might enjoy, or once, a kitten from the ranch's recent litter. For the mice, he explained as the tiny calico explored her cabin. Every home needs a good mouser. Does she have a name? Daisy asked, charmed by the kitten's antics. Thought I'd leave that honor to you, being her new mother and all. Daisy named the kitten Penny for her copper-colored patches, and soon the small creature became a comfort on lonely evenings. As summer progressed, Daisy's friendship with Owen deepened. They shared meals, stories, and increasingly, confidences. She learned he'd left Missouri after his parents died, seeking a fresh start just as she had. He admitted to dreams of someday having his own ranch instead of working on another man's land. "I've been saving," he told her one evening as they sat on her porch watching fireflies. "Got my eye on a piece of land north of here. It's not much, but it could be a good start." "You should pursue it," Daisy encouraged. "Life's too short to delay dreams." Owen's gaze lingered on her face. "I'm beginning to see that more clearly every day." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibility until Daisy looked away, her cheeks warming. Since Thomas's death, she'd closed her heart to such feelings, convinced no man would want a woman who couldn't give him children. Yet Owen's consistent presence in her life was becoming something she looked forward to, something she might even need. The following Sunday, Owen didn't come. Disappointment settled in Daisy's stomach as the hours passed with no sign of him. By evening, worry had replaced disappointment. It wasn't like Owen to break his word without sending a message. Monday morning, Daisy walked to town for her work at the dress shop, keeping an eye out for any sign of Owen. She found it in the form of Dr. Martin leaving the Circle J foreman's house. "Doctor," she called, hurrying to catch him. "I hope no one's seriously ill at the ranch, Mrs. Sullivan," he greeted her, looking tired. "I'm afraid one of their cowboys took a bad fall yesterday. Horse stepped in a prairie dog hole and threw him against some rocks." Her heart stuttered. "Which cowboy?" "Anderson, young fellow with the gray eyes. Nasty concussion and a broken arm, but he'll mend with time and rest." Relief and concern warred within her. "Is he still at the ranch?" "Yes, though moving him to town might be wise if he doesn't improve in a few days. Fever's the concern now." "Thank you, doctor." Daisy turned toward the dress shop, her mind racing. She needed to check on Owen, but propriety made visiting a man's bedside complicated. Still, he'd been unfailingly kind to her. The least she could do was ensure he had what he needed while recovering. After work, Daisy gathered supplies: broth she'd made the previous day, fresh bread, and a jar of her wild blackberry preserves. The ride to Circle J took nearly an hour, and the sun was low when she arrived. The foreman's wife, Mrs. Harris, answered her knock. "Mrs. Sullivan, this is unexpected. I heard about Mr. Anderson's accident and thought he might appreciate some home cooking during his recovery," Daisy explained, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "I hope I'm not intruding." Mrs. Harris's expression softened. "Not at all. Owen's been asking after you, worried you'd think he'd abandoned your Sunday visits. Come in." She led Daisy to a small room off the main house where Owen lay on a narrow bed, his left arm splinted and bandaged. His normally tanned face was pale, with a large bruise darkening his temple. "You have a visitor, Owen," Mrs. Harris announced. "I'll leave you two to talk while I put these provisions away." Owen's eyes opened, unfocused at first, then brightening when he recognized Daisy. "You came," he said hoarsely. "Of course I came." She sat in the chair beside his bed. "When I heard you were injured, I had to see for myself how you were faring." "Not my finest moment," he admitted, gesturing to his splinted arm. "Wasn't paying proper attention to the trail. The doctor says you'll mend with rest, and I will, just sorry to miss our Sunday." His eyes held hers. "I've come to count on those days." "As have I," Daisy admitted softly. They talked until Owen's eyelids grew heavy with exhaustion. Before leaving, Daisy promised to return the following day if the foreman and his wife had no objection. "They won't," Owen murmured sleepily. "Mrs. Harris says you're good for me." Daisy visited daily as Owen recovered, bringing food and reading material to help pass the long hours of convalescence. 2 weeks after the accident, he was well enough to sit on the porch of the foreman's house, though still weak from fever and inactivity. "Doc says I can return to light duties next week," he told her as they shared a pot of coffee. No riding yet, but I can help with repairs around the ranch house. That's wonderful progress, Daisy said, genuinely pleased. She'd missed their Sunday visits to her cabin. Daisy, Owen began, using her first name as he'd started doing during his recovery. These past months knowing you, they've meant a great deal to me, her heart quickened. They've meant a great deal to me as well. I want you to know that before my accident, I'd been working up the courage to speak to you about something important. He looked down at his still bandaged arm. Then this happened, and I realized life's too unpredictable to wait for the perfect moment. Daisy held her breath, afraid to hope yet unable to stop herself. I care for you deeply, Owen continued. In fact, I believe I've fallen in love with you. I know it might seem sudden or improper given your widowhood, but it's not sudden, Daisy interrupted softly. At least it doesn't feel that way to me, hope kindled in his eyes. Does that mean you might share my feelings? I do share them, she admitted. But Owen, there's something you should understand clearly. My marriage to Thomas was childless because I cannot bear children. The doctors in Denver confirmed it before we moved here. I'm barren, just as my cousins say. She forced herself to meet his gaze, expecting disappointment or withdrawal. Instead, she found tenderness. Daisy, do you think I haven't known? This is a small community and people talk. I've known since before I helped you with your cabin. And it doesn't matter to you, she asked incredulously. What matters to me is the woman you are, kind, resilient, hardworking, the woman who creates a home from nothing, who shows compassion even to those who have hurt her. He reached for her hand with his uninjured one. I want to build a life with you, children or no children. Tears blurred Daisy's vision. I never thought to hear such words again. There's more, Owen said, his expression earnest. Remember that land I mentioned? I made an offer last month and it was accepted yesterday. 20 acres with a small house, nothing fancy but room to grow. I'd like you to see it. As my wife, Daisy's breath caught. Are you proposing, Owen Anderson? Inelegantly, without a ring or the ability to get down on one knee, he smiled ruefully. But yes, I am proposing. I love you, Daisy Sullivan, and I want to spend my life with you. Joy bubbled up inside her, a feeling so foreign she almost didn't recognize it. Then my answer is yes. The town of Copper Creek buzzed with the news of their engagement. Some, like Mrs. Peterson, offered genuine congratulations. Others, like Violet and Maybelle, who happened to be shopping when the announcement was posted at the general store, were less generous. Poor man doesn't know what he's getting, Violet commented loudly enough for everyone to hear. A barren wife is no wife at all. Daisy, selecting fabric for her wedding dress, felt the familiar sting of their words, but before she could respond, Owen appeared beside her. Ladies, he addressed the cousins coolly, I couldn't help overhearing your concern for my future happiness. Violet had the grace to look embarrassed at being caught. We just want what's best for our dear cousin. As do I, Owen replied. Which is why I'm removing her from the company of people who mistake cruelty for honesty. He turned to Daisy, producing a small box from his pocket. I was saving this for our supper tonight, but perhaps now is the perfect time. Opening the box, he revealed a simple gold band with a small pearl. My mother's ring, he explained, taking Daisy's hand. She told me to give it to the woman who captured my heart completely. As he slid the ring onto her finger, he spoke clearly enough for everyone in the store to hear. I'm the proudest man in Arizona territory to call you my future wife, Daisy Sullivan. Every part of who you are is precious to me. The store fell silent. Even Violet and Maybelle struck speechless by the public declaration. I love you, Owen Anderson, Daisy said, no longer caring who heard or what they thought. 6 weeks later, on a perfect autumn day, they married in the small church in Copper Creek. Daisy wore a dress of pale blue silk that complemented her eyes, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. Owen, his broken arm nearly healed, stood tall in his best suit, his gray eyes never leaving her face as they spoke their vows. To Daisy's surprise, Uncle George attended, approaching her after the ceremony with uncharacteristic humility. You look beautiful, niece, he said gruffly. Your parents would be proud to see the woman you've become. I'm sorry if I made you feel unwelcome in my home. Thank you, Uncle, Daisy replied, touched by the unexpected apology. That means a great deal to me. Their first home as husband and wife was Owen's newly purchased property, 20 acres of promising land with a sturdy two-room house that needed love but had good bones. Together they made it a home, adding furniture Owen built himself and curtains Daisy sewed from cheerful fabric. One evening 6 months into their marriage, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Owen took Daisy's hand. "I've been thinking," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "There are children who need homes, children who have lost their parents like we both did." Daisy's heart swelled with understanding. "You want to adopt, if you're willing," Owen nodded. The preacher mentioned 2 siblings at the orphanage in Tucson, a boy of 7 and his sister 5. Their parents died of typhoid last winter and no relatives have claimed them. "You've already inquired?" Daisy asked, hope blossoming in her chest. "I wanted to be sure they were still available before mentioning it to you." He squeezed her hand. "What do you think?" Tears of joy spilled down Daisy's cheeks. "I think you've made me the happiest woman in Arizona territory, Owen Anderson." 2 weeks later, they traveled to Tucson to meet the children, James and Emma, both thin and solemn-eyed but quick to warm to Owen's gentle manner and Daisy's kind smile. By the end of the day, the children were calling them Sir and Madam, but Daisy could see a future where those formal addresses would become Pa and Ma. As they prepared to leave, promising to return once the adoption papers were processed, little Emma tugged on Daisy's skirt. "Will we have our own beds?" she asked, her small face serious. Daisy knelt to meet her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. Your brother will have his own bed in his own room, and you'll have yours in a room we'll decorate however you like. And we can stay forever." James asked, the wariness of a child who had already lost too much evident in his posture. "Forever," Owen confirmed, his voice steady with promise. "You'll be Andersons, same as us." On the journey home, as the children finally slept in the back of the wagon, exhausted from excitement, Owen reached for Daisy's hand. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. Daisy looked back at the sleeping children, then at her husband's beloved face. 5 years ago, she'd believed her worth was measured by her ability to bear children. Now she understood that family came in many forms, and love was what truly mattered. "Completely," she answered, and knew it was the absolute truth. 4 months later, Daisy stood on their porch watching Owen teaching James to ride his new pony while Emma arranged wildflowers in a jar beside her. The ranch was flourishing, with a small herd of cattle growing steadily and plans for expansion in the spring. As Violet's prediction echoed in her memory, "You'll die alone in that cabin with no children to remember your name," Daisy smiled. How wrong her cousin had been. She wasn't alone, and she wasn't defined by what her body couldn't do, but by what her heart could. Love abundantly, create a family from broken pieces, and build a life richer than she'd ever imagined possible. Owen caught her eye across the yard and tipped his hat with a smile that still made her heart skip. The Barren widow Sullivan was gone. In her place stood Daisy Anderson, wife, mother, and woman complete in herself, surrounded by the family she and Owen had created together.